Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. I have been promising this episode for a little while now, and we have been trying to coordinate times, and we are both in the same area, but for those of you who have followed along, I made an episode a couple weeks ago about 4 of the big reasons why I would recommend playing in Australia. I also kind of did like a quick recap of the end of the season, but I want to just do like a more kind of in-depth episode about what it's like playing overseas and what it's like to play in Australia. And I thought it would be better to actually have a person kind of like bounce ideas off of and interview me, so to speak. It's not really going to be like a formal interview, but I just thought it would be better than listening to me talk for the whole episode. So we have asked for the services of my sister, Elena, and she will be stepping in to help just kind of tell the story of Australia, because she also knows it because we spoke all the way through, and she was there as well for a bit when she came to visit. So welcome to your second episode of the podcast. Yeah.
Thank you. I am very excited.
Yeah. And so I guess, where should we start? So for those who don't know, I think we've talked about this a bunch of times on the show, but I left New York in about January, and I just returned back home in the first week of October. So I was kind of gone for like 9 or 10 months for my season in Australia.
Okay. So I think this is a pretty basic question. And I feel like in most videos, whatever, when people talk about coming back from overseas, but I still think it's important. What was something that you felt you had to do right away once you came back to New York and like once you were back in our hometown? What was something maybe you were missing when you were in Australia, or you just really love about our hometown that you needed to do right away?
Yeah. I kind of do this thing where when I get towards the end of the season, wherever I'm playing, I kind of always have all these different ideas. So sometimes I'll like make a little list of like, oh, these are the things that I like want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for this one, I kind of made like this is what I want my first night back to be. And it was very simple. It was just like it was honestly very simple. It was like I wanted to go for like a walk around the neighborhood just because I'm always one to just like, that's been my thing. Everywhere I go, I love to just like go out and go for a walk, like whether it's a brand new city, I'm exploring it, or it's just, like kind of my little neighborhood. And I wanted to order pizza. And
where'd you order from?
We got it from Union Pizza.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yep. Which, no shots at Union Pizza. We had Homestyle the other day, and when we had Union, it was like kind of like, and it might have to be a switch up.
I was kind of thinking that yesterday when we had that pizza. I was like, I don't remember it being this good.
Yeah. Hopefully we just retained everyone with our quick minute of like very specific niche Schenectady, New York pizza. But yeah, so had Union Pizza, did get ice cream from Stewart's, had pizza and ice cream. Because part of it too is like, I do in this season, I'll have days, like usually it's like after I play, then I'll allow myself to kind of like eat a little bit of whatever I want. But for the most part, I try and stay like very strict about what I eat like throughout the week. So to kind of just have like a full day where I knew like, all right, I'm not in season right now, I can just eat whatever I want. So to have pizza and ice cream and all that stuff. And then I think we just watched a movie on Netflix or something. And so it wasn't like a big like blowout type thing, but yeah, I definitely do think about that. Like, what's the things I want to do in my first couple of days when I get back? For sure.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel like I think that way also when I'm coming home from Pittsburgh or when I was in college and coming home for breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think, like, as someone who's lived in a bunch of different places, both in America and overseas, what do you think is the best way to get, like, used to your new surroundings? So, like, when you got to Australia, and obviously you have no idea where you are, you don't, like, know what's around you other than what you can see. What do you think is the best way to, like, get familiar with what's around you, figure out okay, I like this place, I don't like this place. Like, I know you said you're one to just, like, kind of walk around. Like you said, when you got home, you wanted to just, like, walk. So do you think that's kind of how you, like, got your bearings in Australia? Or were you just, like, talking to people on the team? Or what do you think is the best way to do that?
My biggest recommendation to anyone when you go somewhere, you're going to live somewhere new, is like the first day or two, if you if you can do this, depending on what your schedule is, just go and just, like, walk without really an intention of I'm trying to see this, that, and the other. Just to, like, because you would be surprised at how much just walking around, seeing these different landmarks without the use of kind of, your GPS or these specific directions that you provided yourself, how much you then become familiar with just what the area is. Now you start to recognize certain landmarks and you recognize, like, okay, I went this way and I saw this thing, and those things stick with you. So I've always found, like, I almost even have a like, I can even kind of picture in my brain, like, the city of Perth and kind of the downtown area right now. Like, if you dropped me there, for the most part, I would know how to get around because I did a lot of walking. And that's the thing too. Like, a lot of players that will go places, they won't have a car, and so you do have to get used to public transport and drive and walking. So that would be the biggest thing that I would recommend, is just kind of walk around, and definitely asking your teammates for suggestions on certain things is a great one. And one thing I try and do a little bit, but I'm not the most, like, outgoing person, especially, like, in a new place, but to try and just talk to people, and whether it was me when I had a job outside of football, to just, like, talk to people, ask them for help in certain instance, or just ask their opinion on things. And even if you happen to get into a conversation with a stranger, like, just kind of, you're doing so much outside of your comfort zone already, like, have that extra little conversation. Maybe they give you something interesting about the city. So, but yeah, biggest thing I would say, just kind of walk around and almost go with the intention of getting lost, and then you always know you can use your phone to get back if you need to.
Yeah, I know. That's something I'm so terrible at, because, like, I've lived in a couple different places now, and I get so, like, comfortable of, like, okay, well, I know that right next to my work is this one little gas station, so I'm going to get my gas from here every single day. And then I'm at home and I'm like, I don't know where to get gas, like, because I just don't, like, venture out enough. But I definitely agree with, like, people you work with. That's what I found for me, like, when I was living in Charlotte, so my coworkers were, like, North Carolina or Charlotte, like, natives. And they'd be like, all right, like, these are things you have to do. Like, these are so Charlotte. These are so North Carolina. Like, you can't live here and not do this. And same thing with, like, Pittsburgh. Like, people I work with, I'll just, like, say something. And they're like, oh, what's that? And, like, then, we start going back and forth. Or they'll say, like, a restaurant. And I'm like, you're lying. That's not a place. And they're like, oh, you have never been there and you lived in Pittsburgh for how long? So I definitely agree with, like, the people you work with, for sure. And I'm sure it's, like, the same way with teammates. Like, and even if they're not from the area, if some of them have been there longer or live on a different side of town, like, they're going to know different stuff than you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think why I like doing the walking thing too is it kind of gives you it allows you to make an assessment of where you're at, just based on what you like, and without any external influence. Because a lot of times, if you go and, like, you get off the plane and you immediately go talk to your teammates and they're like, tell me about the city, and you say, tell me about the city, they're going to tell you that all the things that they love, all the things that they hate, and then that's going to kind of skew your vision of it going into it. So going around and walking, you get to see what are the things that I think are cool. Oh, I want to come back to that and check that out one day. And two, I would even notice like there'd be certain things that I would maybe have done or have seen that people that like lived there didn't really know about. But it's just because I went and explored it, and then even sometimes you might get lucky and now you get to show something about somebody else's city to them. So yeah, I think it's like I would definitely recommend the order of operations be go out and explore on your own first, kind of formulate your own opinion, and then go and see like, all right, what are some things that maybe I missed, or other things to consider from teammates or friends and people that you meet.
That makes sense. Okay, I forgot. I need to look at my list.
Right.
Oh, okay. What is like the most nerve-wracking, stress-inducing, whatever part of moving to another country or traveling to another country? Like, is it, getting all your stuff together before you fly off? Is it when you first get in the airport and you need to like figure out where the door is? Like, what is like the most stressful part of moving to another country?
That's a good question, because I always talk about this, that like when you are doing this and you're playing soccer, it's you have to do so many new things all at once. So it's like it's hard to things that for a normal person would cause stress or anxiety about going over. It's like it almost falls down the priority list for you because of just how much you're going through. I would say like so and each situation is different, right? So I guess I'll put it into context like this. When I went to Germany for the first time, going into it, I wasn't worried about a lot of things, because honestly, I was just so naive and I didn't know. Like, I didn't know a lot of things, right?
Do you think that like is maybe better though?
Honestly, sometimes yes. Sometimes the less you know is the better. And that can have its downfalls as well, when all of a sudden you're in a situation and you kind of like don't know what to do. But I showed up at Germany and, at first I was waiting in the airport to be picked up, and that took a while. I'm like, oh my God, is this like a scam? Like, then they eventually picked me up. I wasn't worried because I knew I had somewhere to live and like something to eat all the time. So I wasn't really worried about that. But then when I kind of was shown where I was living, I was like, oh, okay, like I don't know. And then the football part, I think that was what I was most worried about going into it at that time, was like, what's the football going to be like?
Yeah.
Denmark was different because Denmark was like almost all about the travel.
And like COVID and
because
all
it was
that.
in COVID and it was just so stressful, and there's something just very intimidating about like airports, especially when you're traveling internationally. And going through the customs is always just like kind of stressful. Australia was again kind of like there were certain things I didn't know that wound up becoming the most nerve-wracking. So what I would say probably became the most nerve-wracking was finding somewhere to live.
Yeah.
I would say to anyone who is going overseas to try and play, even if you're going to have to take a little bit of a chunk out of your paycheck, or even if it's only in the beginning, do whatever you can to try and have the club help set you up with somewhere to live.
Yeah.
Because, and it helped in Denmark too, like, granted, you might even convince yourself that you can save money, but it's so hard to find somewhere to live. Sorry, we have our third guest. This is Nova. It's so hard to find somewhere to live in your own country, let alone in a foreign country when you've just moved there. And there's so many different, rules about they want proof of income and they want references and all those types of things. So it's not just as simple as like you can go over there and lease an apartment in a lot of cases. Yeah. And then if you're going down the Airbnb route, all of a sudden you're spending 2-3x what you would normally spend for an apartment because Airbnb charges a lot of fees. So I would say the most nerve-wracking part was housing, was living situation. I mean, I moved 4 times over the course of my time in Australia.
There'd be times I'd FaceTime you and I'm like, wait, did you move again? Because I don't recognize anything in the background.
Yeah, I flew there and I had an Airbnb set up for 2 weeks because I thought, 2 weeks, I'll trial, and then I'll meet guys on the team or the club will set me up with something and boom. Or, if I have to get my own apartment, I'll get my own apartment. A club's like, oh yeah, like, we'll help you out, but it's like, it is, it is what it is. And so then I extended that place for 1 more week. Then I had to book another Airbnb. So moved across town into that one. And then I emailed my original Airbnb property manager and was like, hey, listen, like, I'm kind of in a bind right now. I don't know what to do or how to find somewhere to live. And she was like, I can let you stay, week to week in my places and just sign a lease wherever I have availability. So then I was like going through her Airbnb calendar and seeing like, all right, you've got this place available for these 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Can I stay there? And then you've got this place available for the next 3 months. And then can I stay there? So yeah, that was probably the most like stressful and nerve-wracking, I would say.
So would you maybe suggest to others kind of following this path to, like, before they even move, like, be talking to the club, like, hey guys, how can I have living? So do you think maybe it is, or you would recommend that people maybe not just go to a country, then start trialing, like they have something locked down with a club or a team before they move? Or do you think there's still more benefits to going somewhere then trialing than just the possibly you could have your housing figured out?
Yeah. So it's a great question. The ideal scenario is having something set up before you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the easier scenario. However, with that being said, a lot of times you're not always afforded that luxury. So, for example, if you want to go play in Europe, odds are it's very unlikely unless you have a big resume and you have a ton of experience or, you're working with an agent. Like, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to just go and have something set up.
Yeah.
Like, even, players, it will have come out, I'll be 2 weeks ago now, like Samantha Rosette, like, she had played 2 full professional seasons in Europe. When she just got her contract in France, like, she had the trials set up, but she just basically had to go book an Airbnb for a couple weeks and see how the trials went. So it's kind of like, there's a balancing act to it. Like, you may be able to set up trials, but the likelihood that you can set up trials and somewhere to live is probably going to be tough. And again, like, the caliber of player who is just being offered a contract kind of sight unseen is like, that's a different kind
level.
of, it's a different echelon of player. And, any player, I think myself included, will tell you, you immediately change the game when you're actually in the place. Meaning, like, if I want to go on trial in Paris and I'm emailing them from New York, they're really not going to take it very seriously. Yeah. But if I say to them, hey, I'm in Paris right now, I can come down next week whenever you train. Now all of a sudden, depending on the club, now it's like,
oh, he means
all right,
business.
sure, yeah. He means business, and sure, what the hell? Come on down and practice, and we'll see what we think. And it's not really any skin off our back because some clubs might look at you emailing them from California, and they're in Norway, right? And they're like, oh, this guy's going to try and ask me for, his flights to be paid for or put him up in a hotel. And like, we can't do all that. But if you then go and show up at the door, now it's a very different kind of ask that they're placing on them. So to answer the question, get as much as you can beforehand as possible, but understand that there probably will be a level of like you're gonna have to jump without everything set. You're almost never gonna have everything 100% set up before you fly over.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, for a lot of people that's stressful, and it definitely is. Don't get me wrong, but it's the reality.
So before, kind of when you were talking about Germany and how like you were pretty naive, and we were saying that maybe sometimes that's best. What do you think? Like, what do you think you were naive about that made it almost a little bit easier to not get stressed about some things or like not be so overwhelmed when you were going there? Was it because you didn't really know all the things that ended up maybe going wrong in Germany or could go wrong just in the process of going to another country to play? Or just like you hadn't done a whole lot of international travel, so you're kind of like naive about that whole process? Like, what do you think you were naive about that made it almost a little easier?
I think to your point, I didn't know anything about how to travel internationally. Like, I knew very little about visas. I knew very little about going through customs or, anything like that. I think as dumb as it sounds, I think I was a little bit arrogant in the sense that like I had heard so many people in Germany speak English, so I figured it would be kind of much more accessible is not the right word, but much more just kind of also talked by many people or spoken by many people. Or, on the flip side, I thought I was just gonna kind of like pick up German. And with that being said, I was pretty impressed, proud of myself at where my German was by the end. But it takes a long time to like learn a language and feel a part of a culture. So that's definitely one I would say about the international travel. I think also probably what I was naive about was like I assumed that like professional / semi-professional meant like things were like taken care of and like kind of organized and run well.
Yeah.
And the reality is like with any, organization or business, but like especially in sports, like even teams at the top of the professional level, like
they're a mess.
There's some things that are really a mess,
Yeah.
And it everything just looks different from place to place. Like, whether you're a smaller club and you just like don't have the budget, so everything's disorganized, or you have an owner with ill intentions, or you're a bigger club and you have corruption, like, and so yeah, there was probably like a naiveness in that going over and just kind of expecting it to be like, oh, I'm kind of playing this kind of like professional German academy and it's gonna be like this. And I spoke about it before, like I'm grateful that it was like that because it opened my eyes to, okay, in a lot of ways, playing this game is like it's like the Wild West. Like you gotta roll with the punches. You gotta always adapt, just constantly be adapting, and it taught me that. And I definitely look back at that experience. I think I would have probably done it differently because I think I went into it, and then when I saw things weren't exactly how I wanted them to be, I kept, in the beginning at least, I kind of complained about it, and I kind of thought like, well, why isn't it changing? And it's like you can't waste your time on that stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can try and push for change to a certain extent, and if it's not happening, then okay, you have to do what you have to do, whatever your next step is. So
yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So this is something that I've more thought about for myself, but I want to know if you have the same sort of feelings. So, right, like I teach dance all day. And then even like you've asked me like, oh, like what about teaching at a studio after school or on the weekends or whatever? And I'm like, I'm just like, I don't want to get danced out. So you obviously, your whole life is soccer for the most part. Like I know you do other stuff. Yeah. Of course. But do you ever sometimes feel a little like soccered out? Or do you worry that if I do this also, that might be too much soccer? Do you ever kind of feel like that? Or do you ever worry about that?
100%. And this answer has actually evolved and changed over the past, 5, I don't know how many years I've been doing this, like 6 years since I really started this. In the beginning, I thought that I could just do so much soccer all the time. And I realized as I've gotten older and done it more that I can't.
Yeah.
It is too much. And this is different for everyone. So don't necessarily take my advice. Like I know guys who are in their 30s and older who still just are obsessed with the game and just love it. And so if that's you, like 100%, don't necessarily take exactly what I say as gospel, but I think like with any job, there are players who look at it more like a profession and they kind of, clock in and clock out. And I think there's this feeling that all of us just love playing the game from sun up to sundown. And we just feel so blessed and grateful to be able to do it. And we are, but it's to varying degrees for all of us. So to answer your question, yeah, I definitely, there's times where I feel soccered out. There's times where I just, just want to do other things. And especially, you're in like the dog days of like a long, grueling season. And, like, I mean, you just fantasize about going to a beach somewhere or, like just going and like playing tennis or just like doing something completely away.
Yeah.
And it was one thing I was worried about in Australia when they asked me to coach.
Yeah.
When I first went over to Australia, I was like, I'm going to play. And then what I'm going to do for work is like, it's all going to be outside.
Yeah. It's got to be separate.
The game. I want it to be like, whether it's restaurant or whether it's whatever it is. Also working on my business was like great for me. So that's where I thought it was going to go. And so then when they asked me to coach, I was like, obviously I have a lot of experience with it and I know I can do it very well, but I was nervous about that. I was like, this is a lot. And there were times when it felt like a lot. Like all the other guys would be at the ground, 3-4 times a week. And I was there sometimes 5, 6, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I would just say to anyone, that's doing it, like to just be open to other new things as they come along. Like, and if you have other interests in whether it's a hobby or a new business idea or a different pursuit, like don't be afraid to try it out, because I think we tell ourselves that if we do anything that distracts us from soccer, it's like going to hurt our performance somehow.
Yeah.
And it's really not true, like you should live a full kind of balanced, complete life. And yes, you can be very determined and focused at this one particular endeavor, but burnout is a real thing too.
Yeah.
So.
I think there are certain professions, maybe ones more that have to do with like a talent you have, that sometimes people just see that and they expect you to like want to do it 24/7, and that's like your whole personality.
Yeah.
Right? Even like I see it sometimes with like teaching. Some people like, oh, you're a teacher, like you just like love kids and like want to be with kids all the time. No, I'm sure there are some teachers like that, but I don't just want to like hang out with 6-year-olds.
No,
I don't find that like that's not what I want to do outside of things. Or even like I think a lot maybe with like athletes, they think, oh, like you play basketball, you play soccer, you just like want to go basketball every second of the day and talk about basketball and like all this stuff. And so I'm wondering maybe if it's like professions that are more around like talents, because like you think about like bankers, you don't like meet someone who like is a banker and you're like, oh, you want to come count money at my house later, because they don't want to do that. So that's like an interesting like thought.
This maybe kind of be like a bigger conversation, but I think in a way it kind of like gives people, I don't know, almost like a sense of peace to know that those people that are out there are loving it. So for those of us that are like people want to still believe that there is a dream job out there or like a dream life. And if they know that, oh, this person that is a professional athlete still goes through a lot of the same struggles and has certain points where they straight up hate their job, because that's the reality. Sometimes we all hate our job too. Just because it's kicking a ball doesn't mean that it doesn't come with its own set of circumstances that make it difficult. But I think people, they don't want to believe that something like that
has like downsides.
Yeah, has people in it that don't just live it, love it, breathe it every day, especially considering, if they do a job that they don't really like and it's not being a professional athlete, it's, just your normal run-of-the-mill 9 to 5, then they're kind of like, well, what the hell? If I don't even like this, like, and they're saying they don't like being a professional athlete, then
what can I do?
What is the world, And it's funny, when I was getting my hair cut a couple weeks ago, like the barber asked me, was like, I was telling him about what I did, I was just in Australia and playing, and like, isn't it? And they go, isn't it just great to do what you love? And I talked to my buddy Luca about this when I was visiting him a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I processed that question, and my first response wanted to be like, how much time you got? Because like,
yeah,
that's a
loaded question.
That's a loaded question. Because like, yeah, there's times where I've loved it, but like, like there's times where I've hated it. There's times where all the people who I've interviewed on it have probably hated it, whether they would choose to admit it or not. And there's, a lot of the 90% of these players that I've had on this show as well, and myself included, like, we're also not making enough as players to actually like just live and be humans.
Yeah.
So all of us are coming home and coaching, or coaching in the, during the season, or we're doing a different job, or we've started our own business. So like, that's part of it too. It is like, you may actually just love the idea of football so much and just getting to play it, and that's your thing. That may be enough for you. But the reality is like, some of us play for 10, 12 years and we never fully get just that. Or it takes you so long to get to that, or you know what I mean? So yeah, it's an interesting point in like how much, especially when it becomes a profession for you, like how much does it still, how much weight does it still carry in your life,
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's very interesting. It's like the concept of whenever like movie stars or celebrities have any sort of like complaint, there's always that group of people that are like, oh, what are they complaining about? They live the dream.
Yeah.
They're just ungrateful. And it's like, no, like there's still some, like, you don't want to look into it, but there's still some like downsides of being famous, being a singer, whatever, going on tour.
Yeah.
Which, like you're saying, people like still want to believe that there is a dream job and there is a perfect, I love it and I'm so happy and I love every second.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's partially too, because like you said, they don't want to hear someone who they deem to, kind of have quote unquote a better life than them complain.
Yeah.
Right. Like they just don't want to. And I, I've been very aware of that, and I've spoken about it on this show too. I'm like, I understand that like people don't, in a sense, want to hear about like our kind of like struggles, because one, we chose this, so I get that, and two, it's like, people are like, well, you kick a ball, like how hard can it really be? So I get that, and I'm cognizant of that, but I think like, I don't know, whether it's music, whether it's art, movies, athletics, like any of these kind of like dream professions, like, we're not asking you to necessarily have sympathy, but like empathy kind of goes a long way, like regardless of what you do for a living and what the challenges are. So
yeah, very interesting. Kind of like on the same topic of almost community and others and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of talked about it, or maybe I've just kind of noticed it. I feel like in other countries, it's more smaller towns or neighborhoods will have teams.
Yes.
Right? Like our little town doesn't have any sort of team at any level of any sport. It's high schoolers and peewees, and that's it. So how do you think maybe like a community or a neighborhood is maybe more unified if they have like sport teams or neighborhood teams, community teams? Do you think they're any closer, or do you think it's just like they're just so used to it and some people are going to go watch a game, some people aren't? It's not really a big deal for them.
I don't know if I can quite speak to it, because I've never been on like the kind of other side of it, the fan side of it, but
Mhm.
just what I've witnessed and what I've seen, I really think it's valuable
Mhm.
to a community, because a lot of these clubs around the world are not necessarily even just football clubs. A lot of them are sport clubs. So it's kind of like very similar to like a kind of YMCA in the United States, where people can go and they have a bunch of different activities or sports that people of all abilities and levels can do. And so in that regard, it like brings the community together in a sense. And also, you know, for the spectators, it kind of like brings, there's kind of like this saying I would hear some of the guys say in Australia, like, support your local. And so it was like, you go down, like, you support the local people who are trying to put this event on, this club together, you know, because there's a lot of hardworking people. There's a lot of volunteers that go into doing these things. So you go and support it. And two, there's like, just, there's a sense of kind of camaraderie. Like, you know, I know in Europe, it was kind of just like everyone from like the little village, you know, would pop down and go and watch the game. And, you know, there's food and everybody just kind of catches up, and there's just something very nice about it. And I desperately want it for the United States.
Yeah.
And not just because I love the game the way that I do, but because of what I feel like it can do for community here.
Yeah.
And how it can hopefully like bring our communities together more and stronger and just more connected. Because you know, I understand why it hasn't happened in the United States. But I think, you know, I think there's something that's different about that versus, you know, the model that we kind of have with like university and like high school athletics. Because there's, I don't know, like there's something about, you know, even if there's a college in your local area, if you didn't go to that school, it's like, how connected can you be to it, right? And, you know, the majority of the population is just all students. Whereas, like, you know, on these teams, you'll have players of varying ages. And so it kind of bridges a little bit of a gap in that sense. And, you know, same thing with high school. I think for a lot of us, like, once we graduate high school, like, we kind of want to step forward in our lives, and we don't really necessarily want to go back and, you know, keep watching
go to the
high
homecoming
school team
game.
and support the homecoming. So I just, you know, that's my personal opinion, that I feel like it would be, you know, cool to have kind of like a community-based thing where it's less about, you know, specific allegiances to your school or anything, but more just about your allegiance to your community. So it's like a lot broader. I would love for it to be in ways similar to what I saw in Australia and Europe over here.
Yeah, because you're right. It's like the way it is right now, you have to have some sort of connection. Because, like, I'm thinking Texas, right? High school football. Obviously, I've never been, whatever, but from what we've heard, it's big. Like, cult kind of following, whatever. But in a sense, you still need to have some sort of connection. Like, it would be weird if I, in New York, was obsessed with a random high school Texas football team. Because, like, that makes no sense. But, or even if I lived in Texas, it would be a little bit weird if I was, like, obsessed with the next town overs. Because, like, why?
Yeah.
But if it was more of just, like, this town had a team, it would be so much easier to have, for it not to be weird for me to be involved and be there because, like, I live here. Yeah. That's just our community thing. Because I even think about a lot of stuff around here is so tied to, like, the high school. Or, you know, like, our really only community building events or whatever would be, you know, like Niska Day or something like that, which is very much high school. Or, you know, older parents bringing their kids there. It's kind of weird, I feel like, for us to just, like, show up. Yeah. Because it's like, who are you? What are you doing here? Like, this isn't really for you.
Yeah, and it's why, like, again, this won't necessarily bring an entire community together because some people just aren't going to want to go and watch the sport, and I get that. But that is the type of thing where it's like there's a multitude of reasons why you could go down and watch the game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, every Saturday it's the perfect opportunity for you and 3 people from around town to go meet up, have a coffee, and maybe you're not even watching the game, you're just chatting.
Yeah.
Or if you do just like the game and maybe you don't necessarily have a big tie to the community, but you're in town and you want to go check it out, like just because you want to watch a game, or I think it and I think it could like kind of like spark other sort of other ideas along a similar line, right? So whether that's other sports or other activities or just other ways to like try and tie your community together more, I think would be cool. And it allows for, like, obviously this is what I do, right? Where I tell a lot of these stories on this show. Like, I think story is like one of the most powerful things. So now it's like if you have a community-based thing where the people from the town help build it, and now you can create history, you can create tradition. You also have storylines in each season of, oh, we signed this new player, or oh, the local kid that stayed here since he's 10 is now a part of the professional team, and we get to watch him play. Or, oh, this kid went and signed for the biggest club in America. Like, you know, like all those little things, like now it's something else to talk about, and it's something to kind of, again, bring people together. So yeah, I think I would love to one day, I don't know how, but kind of shape the culture, around the sport a little bit more and steer in the direction of the European model.
Yeah, because I even think about, I think it was it the last game of the season for Shockers or championships or something like that? Yeah. And I had been to a game or two for like a home game for Shockers before, and there was like a good amount of people in the audience, or not the audience, in the stands, whatever. And then that last game, it was like packed. Like we walked in, like, can we get a seat type thing? And at first I was seeing people around and I was like, I recognize you. How do you know anybody here? And then I was like, wait, this is not really so much of like, we're here to watch us. It was like an event. Yeah. It was like a thing that was on everybody's calendars to like go to. It wasn't, oh, my cousin's brother's whatever is playing, let me go support. It was people I knew had no connection to the game, just lived in the area, were there. And I was like, that was really cool. Yeah. And I know that Shockers is kind of like a town team. I guess in my head that's kind of how I think of it. But it's a pretty big town team, right? It's not just like a little like individual town. It's like a bunch of people and a bunch of towns and stuff. But yeah, even that was just so cool because it was like just like a social event almost. Yeah. Obviously you guys were playing and people were watching and cheering, but it was summer, the fireworks, and you're walking out with the little kids holding their hands, like it was so cool. And
I mean that's the way. And I've even talked to people in Australia, because like I think Australia, there's probably a lot of things that they could take from the way that America does it, right? Mm-hmm. Like for example, like the team that we're referring to, the New York Shockers, which is in the NPSL, which plays in the summer. There would be food trucks and concession stand and like t-shirt giveaways, and all the kids come out and play at halftime. So we have a way of kind of, I don't know if this is a word, but like eventizing every event and turning it into entertainment. And so you can still, I think Australia could learn a lot from that. And when it comes to soccer, like they could make it more about like, all right, how do we get people down from the community that maybe don't necessarily care about soccer, but like you said, oh wait, there's this new thing to do. Yeah. It's kind of like, even if you're not big into the theater, but if you've got a theater in your city and some new show is coming in town, like people go out and see it. It's
just like the talk of the town. Because so even if you don't care, you gotta go.
It's something to do that you're very intrigued and you're interested in. So, but like to your point about like the Shockers, like what Australia offered that was unique was you had these leagues that were kind of like very regionally based. So then you can also kind of create these rivalries within, I played for Subiaco and we would play against Netherlands, which is the team right over. And, there was a point where we were training on their ground while ours was under construction, and so now it's like you have these kind of like rivalries which can fuel things. It's like the same thing with our community here. Like if we could have, all right, the neighboring towns are playing against each other, like, oh, it's the local derby, like,
yeah.
Now granted, maybe it's only like a couple hundred people at each game, but it just builds story, it builds camaraderie and community. So yeah, I think that's, I don't know, I'm definitely fascinated by that, and that would be something I'm like, I'd be curious to one day kind of post playing career be like, do something in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. That would be very cool. Okay, I think I have like one more question, and then we have some questions from the audience.
From the audience, yes.
This one's a little more like, I guess you can say dark. Was there ever like a moment where you were in Australia where you were like, okay, if this doesn't work, I'm done. I'm going home. I'm packing it up. I'm over it. Or were you pretty much the whole time just like rolling with the punches? Crappy stuff was happening, but you just kept moving.
I think I knew that if I went there and I went on a bunch of trials and didn't get offered any contracts, that I was probably just gonna be like, all right, like, I'm done, I'm coming back. It was kind of interesting because then when I went on the very first trial and got offered a contract the next day, I was like, oh, okay. Because this is the thing, right? Like when you do this, and I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I feel like in talking to other people, I can echo the sentiment of a lot of people. Like you constantly go from day to day being like, oh, I'm good, to the next day being like, am I good enough to play? Like,
yeah.
And it's just constant.
Yeah.
So going over there, I'm like, I feel like I'm a good player. I feel like I can play at this level. But what if I go and I'm not?
Yeah.
And so there was that. I would say that I was kind of like, all right, if I don't really get contract offers, like that's the end. Once I got into it, I think barring like a major injury, or if I was, like really starting to experience some of the mental health stuff that I had when I was in Denmark, I think I was going to stay, because so much of this season, this contract for me, this going there in the first place, was about proving a lot of stuff right and wrong. So proving stuff right in the sense that all this time I've known that I can play, proving that right. Proving wrong what happened in Denmark is like, that's me, that's my story. So I mean, for those who don't know, I've talked about this before, but like I played in Denmark for a couple months, and it was during COVID, and it was just like I was incredibly isolated and wasn't really able to connect socially with anyone outside of the game, and even on the field as well. It was just like it was a very difficult time, and I then started to like play poorly, and then like my player pass didn't come in, so I wasn't able to play for the first couple of weeks, and it was just so much mentally, and I just wasn't enjoying my experience whatsoever. And I kind of had to take a step back. And so part of me was like thinking that was what just playing professionally was. Like, okay, yeah, you're always just kind of a little bit depressed and stressed and
yeah.
And so it was proving to myself that wasn't the case. And just like not wanting my story to end like that.
Yeah.
So what I knew going into Australia was I wanted it to be a more positive experience, but I also knew that in order for me to have what I was looking for out of it, I needed to also face adversity again and face difficult things, and then prove to myself that I could overcome them. Because that was part of, like, again, the fear coming home was, well, things got tough in Denmark, and then eventually I chose to leave. So, like, what if that's kind of me? What if that's my MO? So I needed to go to Australia and have things thrown at me that I needed to somehow overcome and do it. And so especially once I had like kind of the confidence boost in the beginning and I felt like I started to settle in, I was like, all right, I got to stick this out till the end, regardless of what happens. And it was tough. Like I had injuries. I had coach get fired. I had, almost getting relegated. I got dropped at the end of the season. Like, I haven't really spoken about this as much on this show, but, in the middle of the season, I was pretty confident that I was gonna have a serious talk or be offered a contract for the following season. Come the postseason, I am not really so confident that that's the case.
Yeah. And
there's hasn't really been much lines of communication between me and the club. So, it was an amazing experience, an amazing season, but it definitely didn't come without its struggles and stuff. So, but again, like I said, that's kind of what I'm proud of and grateful for, that I still got those, and then I'm able to still come to it at the full end of the story, not having left early, not having bailed when things got hard, and talk about it now. So yeah, it's I guess in the context of the question that you're asking and referring to, if other players are thinking of like the same thing, like understand that you're gonna have times where you feel like you want to quit. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. Every single player that I've spoken to on this show has had moments where they thought about legitimately quitting the game.
Yeah.
And sometimes like it might be the right time for you to step away the game. There's a lot of different factors, and I can't give one answer as to whether or not, it's your time to step away, or it's just time to like persevere and push through, or take a break, or whatever. But you're gonna go through really hard times, and that's kind of like what makes this such a rewarding path, is that when you do get the moments of the highs, it's because you've been through so many lows to get to those highs. And it's a drastic difference between the two. It's very unlike any other career out there where you can go from, like I've said it before, but I'll say it again, like the end of the summer of 2022, I had just come off breaking my wrist, wanted to go and play for the Shockers again, and finally got healthy and was training every single day, was training every night, and kind of just got to the point where I realized, like, all right, this coach is, just not going to give me a chance, not going to give me an opportunity with this team this season. And so, to kind of lay out the timeline, like 2021, I came home from Denmark. I immediately was in the starting lineup of the Shockers and was a contributing player and felt like a big part of that team. Fast forward to 2022, I kind of feel like I'm the third or fourth string right back and like not even remotely near the depth chart. And then fast forward another 6 months to 2023, and I'm overseas. I'm playing in another country. I'm getting paid to play, and I'm starting nearly every game.
Yeah.
And, scoring goals and getting assists and like playing in the center of the park as well. So it's like, I say that to try and illustrate those highs and those lows. And so I can't say that every time you're in a low that there's gonna be another high that's coming.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to say like when you're in a low that it's time to just always pack it in and quit. So yeah, it's a tough thing, and for sure there was even stuff, off the field when I was in Australia where I thought, is this really worth it? Is this what I still want to be doing? Mm-hmm. Like when I had to come home when our dog passed away, and like I wasn't able to like be here for that or be close enough, and yeah, and like missing holidays and missing birthdays and stuff like that. It was it's something that, it's funny, a player said a couple weeks ago. She was like, it gets old quick.
Yeah.
And it's true. We do make the sacrifice for this thing. And maybe in the beginning you might think it's kind of like this like romantic thing, like, ooh, I'm chasing the dream, and I missed my friend's wedding, or I missed my friend's birthday, or they got this new apartment, or I missed this holiday. But that shit gets old so quick.
Yeah.
Like, because then the reality is, like, you see your friends like all hanging out, and you're chilling in an apartment 10,000 miles away, and like you got to go to sleep because you got to train in the morning, or whatever it is. So definitely there were times where I thought, wow, this is really tough, and do I still want to do it? But it was a really rewarding experience, and the feeling of accomplishment and achievement that you have after completing a season, or completing a match is it's definitely euphoric. It's definitely high. So yeah,
I guess it's kind of like a skill you build or acquire over time, of like knowing, okay, this is a low in which is a sign I should quit. Or not, I guess quit has a bad connotation, but release myself from this position. And there's other times where this is a low that I just need to ride out and push through, because either it's gonna get better or I'm gonna learn a little something from this or whatever. That's like comes with time and experience, it sounds like, of knowing the difference between the lows, of like a Denmark low is not something you could just like push through and come out better on the other side. Like, no, it was time to go. But like not making, or not being at the same spot you were in the Shockers team the second year, that was the type of low that was like, let me do something else. Like, but then there was lows in Australia where you're like, all right, I just gotta, keep pushing until tomorrow and the day after and the day after. So it's like a judgment call type thing. Yeah,
because sometimes it's not just staying in the situation and keep grinding and keep working hard to like put yourself out of the low or out of the negative, right? Like sometimes it's just simply a change of scenery or a change of perspective, and all of a sudden you're in, and I mean, you see this all the time in sports, like constantly. People will go and they'll be on the bench over here, they'll move over here, all of a sudden they're playing all the time, and vice versa. And so, yeah, sometimes like that might be the first step, is like change up your scenery, find a new opportunity that's different for you, and then if it's still feeling the same, like, all right, then sit down and kind of have another think about it.
Yeah. All right, so we have our questions from the audience.
Yes. So I pulled, this was a couple weeks ago, I pulled like on both the my personal Instagram and In the 11 Pod, if you want to follow that at In the 11 Pod on Instagram, some questions about if anyone had things that they were curious about, like playing in Australia, living in Australia, anything like that. So like I said, if you want to follow along and ever have questions on stuff, like comment on Instagram or always on YouTube as well. You can drop a comment and I'll try and answer it in episodes.
Sounds good. Okay, so our first one is from Federico, and it says, do you need a new teammate?
Federico Diaz, did an episode with him way back. Forgive me, I can't remember the number right now, but go check him out. And it's a good question, because it kind of goes back to the video I made a few weeks ago of like, what are some of the reasons to go and play in Australia? And I think Australia is a good place for players to consider. Mm-hmm. And so I would strongly encourage people to kind of give it a look. And lately I've had a couple of people like reach out to me and say, hey, like kind of what's the word down there? So Australia, New Zealand, definitely give it a shout and don't sleep on it, because I think it's I won't belabor that point. Go and watch that video, but it's a good spot.
Nice. I would agree. After visiting, I'm a fan.
Yeah. Good weather, good people, like
yeah.
It's good.
And I need to go back in summer because winter was cool and all, but it's kind of like torture to walk on the beach in a jacket and sneakers.
Yeah. Yeah. Summer there is awesome.
Yeah. All right. Our next one is from Austin Hoodlow. Can you compare the level of competition to other leagues in Europe and the US?
Yeah. Austin, shouts out to him. Played with him in Germany. One of my very good friends. Can I compare the leagues in Australia to other places in Europe?
Yeah, like the level of competition.
It is a little bit lower than certain places in Europe, for sure. But I think that's kind of, I mean, people could assume that. Like, it's not, it's not Australia's biggest sport. Their biggest sport is AFL, and that's what they're like super crazy about. There's a lot of people that really like soccer, but like I said, it's just not the biggest sport. So with that being said, there are still a lot of good players there because there are good Australian players that are coming up, and there are players that are foreigners that move there and go there for like the quality of life type thing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of like kind of the idea of like how some of these big time players in Europe will like move to America because they can, have nice weather and make a lot of money and like that type of stuff. So like, there's players who come down to Australia and it's pretty easy to immigrate there and they can make a pretty good chunk of change playing in some of these lower leagues, and it's maybe not as stressful as Europe is, and like they can kind of live a little bit calmer, smoother life. So I would say, like, obviously if you're going to go for like the highest level of competition, like of course, like you're going to want to go to a place like England or Germany. Like it's not quite on the same level, but like I wouldn't say to just sleep on it and say that it's something to be laughed at or scoffed at, just based on my experience and what I've seen. Like I think like when I was training with the first team in Germany, it was obviously that team was like a much higher level because all those guys have like gone on and are current professionals or were professionals. Even the second team, like some players like could definitely just seamlessly slide into Australia. Denmark was probably like a more solid level just because they were more like very structured and tactical in the way that they played and super smart in the way they read the game. But Australia would like have there's a lot of UK influence too, so there's a lot of like English and Scottish and Irish guys that come down. They're big and bruisers and they know how to play and they're smart. So yeah, I would that's kind of what I would say about the level.
Yeah. This might be hard for you to answer because see, like wherever you go, you'd be like tuned in the football scene. But I feel like maybe in America, like I'm not really big into like American football, but it's everywhere. Like I know some stuff. It's, everyone talks about it. It's whatever. Whereas in like America, soccer, if you're not like tuned in or have some sort of connection, it's not really just like out and about and on the radio and whatever. So in Australia, do you think it's a little bit more talked about, kind of like American football is in America, or is it still kind of like in America where if you know about it, you know about it. If you don't, you don't?
I think it's still kind of niche sport in Australia. Also because I think if there weren't as many immigrants and foreigners that lived in Australia, I don't think the culture around the game would be the same. Because a lot of the clubs are like backed by specific backgrounds or like nationalities. Like there was a couple different Serbian clubs that we played against, an Italian club. I think there was a Croatian club. But there's a lot, and you'll find that in other places around the world too. Like kind of a certain, in Germany, there are a lot of Turkish people that immigrate to Germany, so like a bunch of Turkish people will go and create a Turkish club. So I would be curious to see like if it was like just all Australians, what it would be like, because I don't think it's the same. But yeah, I think it's still kind of like not culty, but like almost kind of like you got to be in the know to know.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, and our last one is from Ali DiNardo, and it just says koala content.
Yeah. I think that's just like, I mean, it's just cool. Like, there's just so many different animals and wildlife that's in Australia that you don't get to experience anywhere else in the world. So you're not going to go and necessarily see koalas out and about, but depending on where you live, like you might go and see some kangaroos just out about in a field. Completely different in terms of like what birds you'll see and birds you'll hear.
Oh my god.
And, like, yeah, just you're going to see a ton of different animals and wildlife and stuff, and it's really big in Australia. Like they really are very environmentally conscious and like trying to preserve their wildlife, and it's cool. Like it's a very outdoorsy and like kind of eco-friendly culture and environment. So yeah, and you can go see yourself some koalas down under.
Yeah. I remember that when we were in your apartment in Australia, the birds sounded like crying babies or like cats that were injured.
Exactly, yeah.
And they were morning to night. Like they did not stop.
Yeah, I remember in the beginning I thought the same thing. I was like, is somebody's baby crying out on the street, or is there a cat injured? And eventually when you start to hear it every day, you're like, oh, okay, this is a bird or something.
Yeah. Or I remember too when we were on Rottnest Island and we were in like the restaurants and the little quokkas just like hop in, and we were like, oh my gosh, we're taking pictures. They're like trying to like, beg at our feet like dogs or something like that. And the workers there, they're just like putzing around, seemingly like not even noticing that like a quokka just like took a little quokka poop in the middle of the restaurant. Yeah. Like that was definitely interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, completely different animals to anywhere else in the world. So another cool thing.
Yeah.
About Australia.
Yeah.
That's all she wrote?
That's all she wrote.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much for stepping into the 11.
Oh my gosh,
and
anytime.
Being on the episode. I think it was cool to talk about like I said, the experience and be able to bounce ideas off of more, and hopefully people enjoyed it. I think we definitely answered a lot of questions about people that, maybe want to go and play, like what are some of the things that they kind of need to prepare for, be ready for. Yeah, so if you've made it this far, I definitely appreciate you. And we'll ask you one quick favor before you go. So 88%, what would you say? Good number or not so good number?
I mean, not terrible, but...
Well, what if I told you that 88% of the views that we get on the YouTube channel come from people who are not subscribed?
That's kind of terrible.
Right? Right? So, shouts out to and obviously this fluctuates, but shouts out to the, 12% of you out there who are subscribers and watching. And we love the views. We love people that watch. We love people that engage, of course.
Yeah.
But we need you guys to subscribe.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like, if you're watching all the time, like, just subscribe.
Just subscribe. It's that simple. All you gotta do, I mean, you're watching right now, right? All you gotta do is just move your mouse a little bit. Click. It
is very close to the like button.
It is so close to the like button. You could just honestly trip over, bada bing, bada boom. You tap them both, and then you're on your very merry way. And really, I mean, we haven't changed your day that much, you know? But we put out this fantastic free episode for you to consume. So it's the least you could do is leave us a little subscribe. Yeah, that's it. So please subscribe to the In the 11 podcast on YouTube. For those of you who are listening, we appreciate you, and make sure that you are subscribed or followed along whatever platform you listen to. With that being said, I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.